I thought buying a quiet home at the edge of town meant I was leaving all the noise behind. I wanted peace. A garden, a porch swing, the sound of crickets at night instead of traffic. And for the first few months, that's exactly what I got. But then came the HOA. They didn't like that my grass wasn't cut to their exact length. They didn't like the color of my shutters. They didn't like the fact that I refused to bow my head when their clipboard committee came knocking. At first it was petty notes on my door. Then it was fines. Then it was threats. I thought they'd run out of ways to bully me. I was wrong. Because one morning, I stepped outside and found a deep trench dug all the way around my property. I'm not talking about a little ditch. I'm talking 4 feet wide, 3 feet deep, circling my house like a moat. My car couldn't leave. Delivery trucks couldn't reach me. Even my mailman had to throw my letters across the gap like I lived on an island. And the HOA? They stood across the road smiling, like they'd finally taught me a lesson. But what they didn't know was that I had hidden cameras. Every late-night meeting, every shovel hitting dirt, every smug little comment about scaring me out. I had it all, recorded in crystal-clear detail. And when I released what those cameras had caught, the whole community turned upside down. Before we go on, hit subscribe, so stories like this reach you first. When I first bought the place, I thought I'd found a slice of freedom. It wasn't fancy, just a modest 2-story house with faded blue shutters, a creaky porch swing, and a yard that backed right into a stand of old oak trees. The kind of place where you could breathe, where neighbors waved instead of glaring, where the loudest sound at night was the chorus of cicadas under the summer moon. I had worked my whole life for that little house. After years of renting apartments where walls were so thin you could hear your neighbor sneeze, I finally wanted something that was mine. A place I could paint any color I wanted, plant a garden, park my truck without worrying about tickets. The realtor warned me, though. "It's a nice neighborhood," she said, tapping her nails on the paperwork, "but it does fall under a homeowners association. They keep things tidy." At the time, I didn't think much of it. Tidy sounded fine. I didn't plan on leaving junk cars in the yard or painting the house neon orange. What I didn't understand, what nobody tells you when you're signing the dotted line, is that some HOAs aren't about tidy. They're about control. And the one I walked into was ruled by a woman named Patricia. Everyone called her Patty, though never to her face. To her face, it was always Mrs. Harrington. She was tall, always dressed in pressed slacks and a cardigan, the kind of person who spoke like she was addressing a courtroom. Her weapon wasn't a gun or a bat or even her fists. It was her clipboard. From day one, she didn't like me. The very first week I moved in, she showed up unannounced. No welcome basket, no neighborly smile, just a frown and a sheet of paper. "You'll need to repaint those shutters," she said, pointing. "Blue isn't on the approved palette." I laughed, thinking she was joking. "They've been blue for 20 years. The last owner painted them. Doesn't matter. You're responsible now. Approved colors are beige, white, and sage green. I'll expect it fixed in 30 days. That was our introduction. After that, it was one thing after another. The lawn was too long. The birdhouse on my porch was unsightly. My trash cans were visible from the road. My truck was parked at the wrong angle in the driveway. At first, I tried to comply with the easy stuff. But the more I bent, the more she pushed. And I started to notice a pattern. She never went after some of the other houses. The ones with spotless lawns and shiny SUVs in the driveway? Not a single violation. But the single mom across the street? The retired mechanic who liked to work on his Harley out front? Me? We were her favorite targets. It wasn't about the rules. It was about power. The first real fight came in the spring, when she slapped me with a $500 fine for unauthorized modifications. My crime? Planting tomatoes in my backyard. "They attract pests," she sniffed, arms crossed, while I stared at her in disbelief. "They're food," I shot back. "And they're on my property." She didn't blink. "Remove them. Or pay." That was when I stopped bending. The letters piled up. Violation notices. Final warnings. Legal action pending. Some were slipped under my door. Some nailed to my fence. Some mailed with certified stamps like they were from the government. But I refused to pay. That's when things turned ugly. One morning I found my mailbox knocked clean off its post. Another time, muddy tire tracks cut right across my lawn. And one night, someone tossed eggs at my windows, 3 in a row, splattering against the glass like white paint bombs. I knew it wasn't random. And every time I called the HOA office, they said the same thing. File a report. We'll review it. Nothing ever came of it. The pressure built week by week, like they were trying to wear me down until I gave up, paid their fines, and begged for forgiveness. But I'm not built like that. If anything, their harassment only made me dig my heels in deeper. I started documenting everything, every letter, every encounter, every coincidence. I bought small hidden cameras, disguised as porch lights and garden ornaments. At first, it was just to protect myself. I had no idea how important that decision would become. Because while I thought the fines and the petty vandalism were the worst of it, Patty had something bigger in mind. Something designed to scare me into submission. And the morning I walked outside to find my home surrounded by a deep trench, I realized just how far the HOA was willing to go. The first time I saw it, I thought maybe the county had come by to fix a pipe or run a new line. But then I realized it wasn't random. The trench wasn't on the road. It wasn't on the easement. It was on my property, circling my house like a moat. 4 feet wide, 3 feet deep, the kind of cut that made it impossible for me to drive my truck out or even get deliveries in. My jaw dropped. It wasn't just vandalism, it was calculated. Across the street I saw them, Patty and 2 HOA board members, standing together with their clipboards, sipping coffee like they were admiring their handiwork. One of them even chuckled when he saw me step out. "You'll learn," Patty called out. "It's easier to comply than to fight." My fists clenched. My dog barked from the porch, sensing the tension. But instead of shouting back, I forced a smile. Because what Patty didn't know was that every shovel, every wheelbarrow, every smug little smirk had been caught on camera. They thought they'd trapped me. In reality, they'd just buried themselves. The HOA called an emergency meeting that week. They had the nerve to hand-deliver me a notice, failure to comply with HOA standards. Property deemed a nuisance, pending forced removal. In their minds, the trench was the final nail. They thought I'd pack up and leave out of frustration. But instead of arguing, I showed up at their meeting with a flash drive in my pocket. The clubhouse was full. Neighbors filled the folding chairs, most of them tired of Patty's rules but too scared to speak up. Patty stood at the front, smug as ever, calling the trench a landscaping project meant to encourage compliance. That's when I walked forward, plugged my laptop into the projector and hit play. The footage rolled. There they were, Patty and her board members, digging under the cover of night. Laughing, joking, calling me a stubborn idiot as they carved that trench across my property. One clip even caught them bragging, "Wait until he tries to get out tomorrow. He'll be trapped like a rat." The room went dead silent. Patty's smile vanished. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Gasps rippled through the crowd. And then my favorite part, neighbors stood up. "That's trespassing," one shouted. "That's destruction of property," another yelled. Phones came out, people recording, calling the police right then and there. Patty tried to shout me down, claiming it was taken out of context, but the evidence was undeniable. For the first time, the HOA wasn't laughing. They were cornered. When the footage ended, the silence in that clubhouse was louder than any shouting match I'd ever had with Patty. For months, she and her board had bullied me with rules, fines, and intimidation tactics. Now, with one press of a button, I had turned the tables. Phones were up. Neighbors were already texting and sending the clips around before the projector had even cooled down. The HOA board looked pale, realizing they weren't just facing me anymore. They were facing the entire community. The first squad car showed up within 15 minutes. 2 officers walked in, and people practically swarmed them, pointing at Patty and her cronies. I stayed calm, laptop still open, replaying the trench-digging clips for the officers. The officers didn't even flinch. "That's criminal mischief, possibly destruction of property. You'll need to make a full statement." Patty started sputtering. "This is outrageous. We're the HOA, we have authority." The officer cut her off with a shake of the head. "Not on private property. Not like this." They took everyone's names, collected the evidence, and I filed charges. Patty tried to call it community service work, but the footage was clear. They weren't maintaining anything. They were vandalizing my land, trying to trap me, using the HOA like a weapon. That night I went home exhausted but with a grin I couldn't wipe off my face. The trench was still there, ugly and gaping, but for once I didn't feel isolated. My neighbors, many of whom had been silent until now, started dropping by. One older couple brought coffee and thanked me. We've been too afraid to speak out. What you did tonight, you stood up for all of us. The next weeks were a whirlwind. The HOA board collapsed almost overnight. Patty tried to save herself, but when the other members realized how deep the trouble ran, they started resigning one by one. Nobody wanted their name attached to the scandal. The county sent crews to fill the trench, not because the HOA requested it, but because the sheriff's office had classified it as a safety hazard. Trucks rolled up, pouring dirt and smoothing the land back to normal. Watching them erase that moat felt like watching months of intimidation being buried forever. But the real victory came in court. My lawyer walked in with a thumb drive, the same one I had used at the clubhouse. The judge didn't need much convincing. Every clip showed clear trespass, coordinated intent, and malicious damage to my property. Patty and 2 board members were fined heavily and ordered to personally cover the cost of repairs. They even faced probation. The HOA charter itself was suspended pending investigation. With no leadership and no credibility, the association effectively disbanded. Neighbors started cheering me on in ways I never expected. One man down the street shook my hand and said, "You exposed them. You gave us back our homes." Another sent me a letter saying that my hidden cameras had freed him from years of unfair harassment. For me, though, the impact was deeper. I had moved here for peace and privacy, and for a long time I thought that made me a target. But it turned out that standing my ground didn't isolate me. It connected me to others who were waiting for someone to take the first step. I still keep those cameras running, not because I expect another trench, but because they remind me of the night I turned fear into proof. And every time I walk across my yard now, I feel that sense of freedom they tried to dig away from me. The HOA thought they had trapped me. In reality, they had built their own grave, and I had the footage to prove it.